Welcome to Double Portion Inheritance with Maria Merola and Gary Wold, brought to you by DoublePortionInheritance.com. Since 1981, Maria heard the call of Yahuwah to become a watchman to the house of Yisrael and to those within the traditional Christian church. She was instructed to warn them against the false doctrines and pagan traditions of men. After 25 years of studying Scripture, the word of Yahuwah came to Maria again in 2007 as she was called out of the corporate world to become a full-time intercessor and prophetic teacher. The name of the ministry, Double Portion Inheritance, was given to her after she received the revelation of the two houses of Yisrael from Ezekiel 37:16. The mission of this ministry is to bring together the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph for the return of the Messiah, Yahushua. And now, Maria Merola.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today is August 13th, 2022, and this is part 4 of Except Those Days Should Be Shortened. I've kind of taken a few detours. I probably could have had this finished in parts 1 and 2, but a lot of times what I do is when I go through these teachings, I kind of go off on a tangent and maybe sometimes go deep as the Ruach might lead me to start looking things up in Scripture, and I cover some current events and things like that. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover the current events at the end, but I want to make sure that we cover the remaining part of this teaching, part 4, because we only have a little bit left to go and we should be finished. So except those days should be shortened is a phrase that our Messiah used in regards to the Great Tribulation. I'm just going to kind of skim through this. Here's a picture of an artist depiction of 1 Kings 11:29, where King Jeroboam was approached by the prophet Ahiyahu, and he was told that, Solomon's kingdom was going to be, divided because of his idolatry with his many wives, and that 10 of the tribes were going to go to Jeroboam, and the other 2 tribes were going to go to King Solomon's son, Rehoboam. And, the whole message in this is that Yahuwah has cut the kingdom in half because, actually it was the 2 kingdoms have been divided in half because of the idolatry of King Solomon. And so this would explain why Abraham was told to take these animal pieces and cut them in half, and Yahuwah walked between those pieces as a sign of his covenant, because Yahuwah, looking forward, knew that Abraham's descendants were going to become a divided house. And this is why he told Abraham to take a 3-year-old heifer, to take a 3-year-old she-goat, and the Yom Kippur scapegoat. And he says to cut them in half, to divide them in half. Also the 3-year-old ram. I go into detail as to what these animal sacrifices represent and how they point to Messiah. So I recommend that you go back and listen. I talk about how the last 7 years of Daniel's 70th week has been divided in half. And this is what the word shortened actually means. When you look it up in the Greek, Textus Receptus in the book of Matthew, it's the word kalobo. And it means to separate 2 bodies of water, a space or a waterway between 2 piers. It means a dock. We talked about this the last couple of weeks. And in Daniel chapter 12, Daniel was asking about how long the Great Tribulation would be. And he was told that it would be for a time, times and a half times, which is equivalent to 3.5 years, because the word time in Hebrew is moed. And that word moed means 1 year. In other words, one annual cycle of 7 festivals. Times is plural, which means 2 years. And a half times is 6 months. So you have 1 year, 2 years, and 6 months. That's 3.5 years. And so when Daniel asked the question about how long shall it be till the end of these wonders, there was a man standing in the middle of the river with his right hand and his left hand lifted up. And I believe that's Messiah, who stood in the gap. Ezekiel talked about the fact that he was looking for a man who could stand in the gap and who could repair the breach between the 2 divided houses. The only person who could do that was Messiah. So he's standing in the middle of this river, and one angel on one side and another malach or angel on the other side. And he says that he swore by heaven that it shall be for a time, times and a half times. Well, the reason he swore is because Yahuwah installed Melchizedek by an oath. And it says he swore in Psalms 110. It says he swore with an oath, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So the man standing in the middle of the river is not identified, but I believe that based on all the prophetic things we're seeing in this, that Messiah is the one who is standing in the gap. And also, this is why he was crucified between two thieves, because the one thief represents the two southern tribes of Judah, the ones that rejected him, and the other thief represents the 10 northern tribes of the kingdom of Ephraim. He's the one that accepted Messiah, and he said, today you will be with me in paradise. So Yahushua repaired the breach between the two kingdoms. And this explains why, his ministry, I would have thought would have been 7 years long because, Joseph had 2 periods of 7 years that he served in Egypt, 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Jacob worked for 7 years for each of his brides, Rachel and Leah. So in my mind, it was like, well, why is it that his ministry, Yahushua's ministry, doesn't follow the same pattern? I would have thought his ministry would have been 7 years or at least, or even 14 years. But, as I pondered this, as I prayed about it for many, many years, Yahuwah spoke to me and showed me that Solomon, the question he posed to me was, why was he going to cut this baby in half? Well, as soon as he asked me that question, I knew immediately that Daniel's 70th week had to be cut in half. So Yahushua fulfilled the first 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week, leaving a 2,000-year gap in history, what is called the fullness of the Gentiles. Paul talks about that in Romans 11:25. And the latter 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week will be finished by the two witnesses. So these two harlots, these two sister harlots, represent the two houses of Israel. And they each had a baby. They lived in the same house together. But one woman accidentally killed her baby. She rolled over in the middle of the night and smothered him. And the other woman, she stole the other woman's living baby and tried to pass it off as her own. So the two women had to go to Solomon and have him, mediate between these two women. So Solomon's pretending like he's going to cut the baby in half to test the two women. And of course, the real mother didn't want the baby to die. So she said, let the other woman have the baby rather than to see the baby dead. So this is a prophetic picture of how Solomon was the one who caused the kingdom to be divided in half. This baby is a prophetic picture of Messiah. He is the son born to us, the child that is born to us. In Isaiah 9:6, it says, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and he shall be called the everlasting Father. So Yahushua was the inheritance that these two women were fighting over. And so these 2,000 years, these past 2,000 years, the two houses of Israel have been in the nations. Some of them are in the nations, and some of them went back to the land in 1948. But they've been fighting over this land. But during these last 2,000 years, the Gentiles have been just growing by leaps and bounds at the hearing of the gospel of Messiah. And what's happening is Yahushua is finally going to bring these two women, these two houses of Israel, back together in the end of days. And I talked a little bit about how President Trump right now is, they call him the King Messiah Trump, which of course that's blasphemy, but that's what they call him over there. And, his face is on the temple shekel. They've asked him to build the temple. What's going to happen is these people are going to accept a false Messiah rather than the real Messiah. And, what did he say in John 5:43? What did Yahushua say? He says, I am come in my Father's name. That's why we call him Yahushua, not just Yeshua. Yeshua doesn't have the Father's name in it. The name Yeshua just means salvation. The Father's name has been deliberately removed, but he says, I am come in my Father's name, Yahushua means Yahuwah is salvation. So John 5:43 says, I am come in my Father's name, and you receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him you will receive. Well, Trump comes in his own name. And not only does he come in his own name, but he's branded his own name. I mean, he's got the name Trump on everything. Trump Tower, Trump this, Trump that. His whole life, he's been branding himself. These people are going to accept an imposter who comes in his own name. Last week, I stopped with Rachel and Leah. Israel's rebirth physically as a nation did not require labor pains because it happened so suddenly. It happened overnight. In one day, the nation was reborn, as Yahuwah had prophesied that it would. And we read that in Isaiah 66. It says, before she travailed, this is talking about Jerusalem, before she went into labor, she brought forth. In other words, she gave birth before her pain came. She was delivered of a man-child. Well, who is the man-child? The man-child, of course, was Yahushua 2,000 years ago. But see, this prophecy has a double fulfillment because the man-child in the future is going to be the one new man. Do you remember that? In Ephesians chapter 2:15, what does the apostle Shaul or Paul say? He says that Yahushua has made both Yahudim, Jews, and Goyim, Gentiles, one new man. So let's go there. Ephesians 2. Wherefore remember that you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, that word Gentiles in Hebrew is Goyim, Gentiles in the flesh who are called uncircumcision. He says, by that which is called circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world, but now in Messiah Yahushua, you who sometimes were afar off are made near by the blood of Mashiach. For he is our shalom, who has made both one and has broken down that middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity. That word enmity means rivalry, sister rivalry. The rivalry that was between these two sister harlots that Solomon had to settle the dispute between the two sister harlots. And this goes back to Rachel and Leah. These two women were sisters fighting over the same husband. Having abolished in his flesh the enmity. And this word enmity means rivalry. It means hatred. It says, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of two one new man, so making peace. Now, some people, Christians, think that Yahushua abolished the commandments of Elohim. That's not what he's saying. When he says the law of commandments contained in ordinances, this word ordinances in the Greek, dogma, means a man-made decree. The laws of the Pharisees, the laws of the rabbis, they did not want the 10 northern tribes who were divorced and sent away in exile with the Assyrians. They did not want them coming back into the kingdom. They were not willing to let them come back into the kingdom. Even though the book of Hosea says that in the latter days, Yahuwah would marry them again. Even though he divorced them, Jeremiah 3:8 says he divorced Israel, the 10 northern tribes, and he gave them a certificate of divorce. He didn't divorce the kingdom of Judah, though, even though he says they deserved it. They were more treacherous. They deserved to be divorced, but he could not do that because the Messiah had to come through the tribe of Judah. So if he divorced Judah, there would be nothing left of the kingdom. So he had to allow there to be a remnant. And so you see, what did he abolish? Well, the Pharisees would not allow the returning tribes to come back. They became known as Gentiles. They became known as strangers after they were divorced and after they went into captivity with the Assyrians. They got dispersed into the nations and they became known as Gentiles or, Goyim. Because why? In the book of Hosea, he says, you are no longer my people. You are not my people. But he said that in the latter days that they would become his people again. So these Pharisees thought that it was not right to let them back into the kingdom, even though prophecy said that was the Father's will to allow them to come back. so they wouldn't let them come back. And so the law of the commandments contained in ordinances was that the rabbis put up a wall, a literal wall of partition that they built around the temple, and any Gentile, any returning tribe who they deemed as a Gentile, if they tried to come near the temple, they would be stoned to death. So this is what he abolished. He abolished in his flesh the hatred between these two kingdoms. Even the law of commandments contained in ordinances. In other words, the rabbinical ordinances that prevented the 10 tribes from returning. For to make in himself of two one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto Elohim in one body by the cross. Yes, I said the word cross because I believe it was a cross. The 2 sticks of Ezekiel 37, the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph. Okay, it wasn't a stake, it was a cross. The piece he carried across his shoulder, that was a crossbeam. But when he got to the place of the execution, the Staros was standing there already. The Romans had these permanent structures that are already standing there. Okay, so there was 2 pieces, and he carried the stick of Judah to the stick of Ephraim and made them one stick by the cross, having slain the enmity, the rivalry, the hatred thereby, and came and preached peace unto you which were afar off, and unto them that were near. So the ones that were near were the kingdom of Judah. The ones that were afar off were the kingdom of Joseph or Ephraim. Because, Ephraim is Jacob prophesied over Joseph's youngest son, Ephraim, and said he would become a multitude of nations. And that word in Hebrew, multitude of nations, it's in Genesis 48. He said he would become a multitude of nations. And that word in Hebrew, that phrase is melo hagoyim, which means fullness of the Gentiles. Well, the Apostle Shaul used those same choice of words. He said that Israel would be blinded in part until the fullness of the Gentiles would come in. In other words, until the fullness of the Gentiles was accomplished. Well, I believe we are coming to that end of the fullness of the Gentiles as soon as the 2 witnesses begin their ministry of 1,260 days. They're going to finish the 3.5 years that Messiah started. He had a ministry that lasted for 3.5 years. The 2 witnesses are going to finish the remaining part, the remaining half of Daniel's 70th week. And they are the ones that are going to be used as the one new man. They are going to be killed by the false Messiah, and their dead bodies are going to be raised up after 3.5 days. And it says in the next chapter, Revelation 12, that the woman that is clothed with the sun, she's going to give birth to the man-child. And that man-child is the one new man. Okay. And so getting back to the teaching here, this is talking about Jerusalem. It says, before she travailed, before she went into labor, she brought forth, gave birth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth, says Yahuwah? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb, says your Elohim? So you see, this prophecy tells us what Revelation 12 is all about. Because we go to Revelation 12, we can see the exact same thing being presented. Okay? It says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Now, in Isaiah 66, it says she delivered before she travailed. But in this instance, it says that she does go into travail. She does go into labor. Okay? And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven. Well, what is this third part of the stars of the heavens? Well, remember Abraham was told that he had 2 kinds of seed. He said that his descendants would be, Yahuwah told him his descendants would be more numerous than the stars of the heavens. And he said that his descendants would be more numerous than the sand on the seashore. So the sand on the seashore represent the earthly descendants, okay, those that are the literal descendants of Abraham. But the stars of the heaven represent those that are born from above, those that are born again, that we are grafted into the house of Israel through Messiah's blood. So when the dragon takes his tail and draws the third part of the stars of heaven, that's when the 2 witnesses are killed. And it says that he did cast them to the earth. Now, let me show you something. In Revelation 1:20, go with me to Revelation 1:20. You're going to see something. Yahushua says, I will tell you the mystery of the 7 stars which you saw on my right hand, and the 7 menorahs, or the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the malachim of the 7 assemblies, and the 7 menorahs which you saw are the 7 assemblies. So the stars represent, the malachim, the messengers, the angels, and the 7 golden candlesticks represent the 7 assemblies. So now we go back to Revelation 12, and Revelation 12, and the beast is going to kill the 2 witnesses, and the 2 witnesses are not just 2 individuals. We know this because if you go to Revelation 11, it tells us who the 2 witnesses are. It says these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks. Now, I just got done showing you that the candlesticks represent the 7 assemblies. But out of 7 assemblies, only 2 of them our Messiah did not rebuke, and that's Smyrna and Philadelphia. Okay? But who are the 2 olive trees? Well, in Jeremiah 11:16, he tells us that Israel is an olive tree, is likened unto an olive tree. But then after King Solomon died, they became 2 separate kingdoms. They were divided. So in Zechariah chapter 4, it talks about these 2 olive trees that bear the olive oil, and the olive oil is what gives light to these candlesticks. Okay? So the 2 olive trees represent the 2 houses, the 2 kingdoms of Israel, and the 2 candlesticks represent the overcoming assemblies. Okay? Now, these are a corporate body of people. This isn't just 2 individual men, although there might be 2 individual men that represent these 2 corporate groups. That's a possibility. But when they are killed, their dead bodies are laying in the streets for 3.5 days, and it says they heard a great voice from heaven saying, "Come up here." And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour, there was a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were afraid and gave glory to the Elohim of heaven. Now, right here in verse 15, it says, and the 7th angel sounded. You see, every month we are commanded to sound the shofar at the beginning of each new moon. Okay? Just like they did in Jericho. The 7th month of the year is, on the first day of the 7th month, is the Feast of Trumpets. So this is obviously the 7th month. That's why the 7th malach, the 7th angel, sounded. And it says, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our master and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever. So this is obviously the Feast of Trumpets, the first day of the 7th month of, in the scriptures, it's called Etanim, the month of Etanim, but in modern vernacular, they say Tishri, the month of Tishri. Okay, but this is going to happen. The 2 witnesses, the 2 corporate witnesses, are going to be resurrected and taken up to heaven on the first day of the 7th month of Tishri. Then what happens to them? The same one new man, the corporate one new man. There appeared a great wonder in heaven. The woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet is Jerusalem, and she has a crown of 12 stars. And she is about to give birth to the man-child, but the man-child is the one new man. Now, this prophecy was fulfilled once before in the past with Yahushua being born on the Feast of Trumpets, and I've got proof of that too. I've got several blogs, and I've studied the birth of Messiah since 2002. So that's for another teaching, but I'll show you very quickly the constellation that was visible the night he was born. And this is very fascinating. But here we have, this took place on the Feast of Trumpets in 3 BC. And you have Betula, which is the virgin. And the first sliver of the new moon is underneath her feet. And she's giving birth to Ariel, which means Lion of El. And that's the man-child. That's the Messiah. But here's these two planets were in conjunction with each other. Jupiter, which by the ancient Hebrews was called Hazadik, which means the righteous, and Venus, which is called Hamalek, the king. These two planets in conjunction represent Melchizedek, king and priest. Okay? So inside this constellation was the prophetic picture of Melchizedek, the king and priest, being born on September the 11th in 3 BC, which just so happened to be on the Feast of Trumpets. Now, it doesn't always fall on September 11th, but that year it happened to fall on September 11th. So don't go celebrating Messiah's birthday on September 11th, because the Feast of Trumpets doesn't always fall on September 11th, okay? We celebrate his birth on the Feast of Trumpets, okay? So this prophecy has a double meaning. In the past, in 3 BC, the great wonder in heaven, the sign in the heavens was for the shepherds and for the wise men, that they followed the star, the constellation. The woman clothed with the sun was the constellation that they saw. Betula, the virgin. And the moon was under her feet, and she had a crown of 12 stars. But not only was this referring to the constellation that appeared on the night he was born, it's also pertaining to the future when Jerusalem, Paul the apostle in Galatians 4:26 says, Jerusalem is the mother of us all. And we just got done reading in, Isaiah 66, Jerusalem is the mother of us all. So Jerusalem is going to give birth to the one new man. And so she is going to, the Isaiah 66 prophecy, I believe, is referring to the first half of the two divided houses, right? The kingdom of Judah. They came back to the land in 1948. So the Isaiah 66 prophecy, I believe, is referring to the kingdom of Judah coming back to the land out of the nations. But now, at the end of the 3.5 years of the two witnesses, the 1,260-day ministry, now the other half of the house, the other kingdom of Ephraim, which is much bigger, okay? The name Ephraim literally means double fruit, okay? So that half of the house is going to be born again in their incorruptible bodies. Even though we're born again spiritually speaking, there's still going to be another stage of our rebirth, and that other stage means that we're going to be reborn into incorruption. We're going to put on incorruption. So Jerusalem is represented by this woman who, gives birth to the one new man, and the dragon is the beast, and he kills the two witnesses. That's the third part of the stars of heaven. And he did cast them to the earth. That's just symbolic here, okay? And it says she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Well, we know that our Messiah is going to rule and reign for 1,000 years in the millennium, but it also tells us we too will rule and reign with him as kings and priests. We're going to be part of his royal priesthood. So we too are going to rule and reign with him for 1,000 years. And it says, and her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. So people who say there's no rapture are completely wrong. Yes, it's post-tribulation, not pre-tribulation. So I've noticed a pattern with people in the Hebraic community. They overcorrect. They swing too far to the left and then too far to the right. They're trying to correct the pre-tribulation rapture error, but they go with a different error and they say there's no rapture at all. There is going to be a catching away of the bride. In the Greek, it's called harpazo. This phrase, caught up, is harpazo. It means to seize, to snatch away, to take by force. See, in ancient Hebrew weddings, the bridegroom would come at midnight when everybody was asleep. And he would literally take his bride on horseback and he would snatch her away and they would elope. And he would go back, take her to this place that he had prepared for her, a honeymoon suite that he built for her on his father's estate, in his father's house. This is why Messiah said, I go and prepare a place for you, that where I am, you shall be also. That place that he's preparing for us is in heaven, in Shamayim. But we're not going to be gone for 7 years the way the Christian church falsely teaches that, we're going to be raptured and we're going to be in heaven for 7 years. We're only going to be gone for 7 literal days. Jacob and Leah had a honeymoon that lasted for 7 days. That's in Genesis 28. Samson's wedding lasted for 7 literal days. That's the custom of an ancient Hebrew wedding, 7 days. So between the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, there's 10 days, but sandwiched inside of those 10 days, we're going to be up in heaven celebrating the honeymoon in heaven. And then guess what? We're coming back with Yahushua on white horses. It says here, right here in Revelation 19, it says, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the Kadoshim, saints. Okay, and if you keep on reading, it says, and out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. We just read about the rod of iron, right? In Revelation 12, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. Okay, but here's the thing. It tells us that the armies that followed him, in the previous verse, it says, the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Now, some people say, oh, these are the angels. No, we just got done reading that the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints, the Kadoshim. So the ones that are following him on white horses, his army, they're clothed in fine linen, white and clean. That's the bride. We are going to be his army. Okay. Now I'll prove this real quick to you, trying to go through this really fast because I want to make sure we have time to finish the whole teaching today. But go to Ezekiel 37 and you'll see that in Ezekiel 37, this is talking about the resurrection. Okay. And Yahuwah tells Ezekiel to breathe upon these slain. He says to breathe upon the slain that they may live. And it says, so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Okay. And then he goes on and he tells them, he says who these are. He says, therefore prophesy and say unto them, thus says Yahuwah Elohim, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves, and shall put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall you know that I, Yahuwah, have spoken it and performed it, says Yahuwah. But guess what else he says? He tells Ezekiel who these people are. he says that they are the whole house of Israel. In verse 11, he says, then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. It's not the angels. The angels are not the ones coming back with Yahushua. It's the whole house of Israel. And it's the next part where Ezekiel's told to take one stick, and this word for stick, let's look at it in Hebrew. Okay. He says, take one stick, and that word stick means a tree. It's the Hebrew word etz. He says, take one tree and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick, and that word stick also means tree, and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions, and join them one to another into one tree, one stick, and they shall become one in my hand. See, this is when Yahuwah is going to make us one. I mean, he already made us one body by the cross in Ephesians 2:15, but that was in the realm of the spirit. He accomplished it in the realm of the spirit, but now he's going to do it in the natural, in the physical. We are going to become one new man. We are going to become one house of Israel, one bride. Okay, so this is all lining up perfectly. And I'll show you something else really cool. If you want to go with me to Proverbs 31, okay, Proverbs 31 in verse 10, it says, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Well, the entire Proverbs 31 wife is it's a metaphor of the bride of Messiah, because no woman is this perfect, right? Of course, we're supposed to pattern ourselves after the Proverbs 31 wife, but the whole thing is describing the bride of Messiah. Well, what does that word virtuous mean? If you look it up, it says an army. An army. Who can find an army? Okay, it's Kail, and it means a force, an army, wealth, virtue, valor, strength, an army, a band of soldiers. Okay. The bride is his army. Okay. And I'll do you one even better in Genesis chapter 1, where Yahuwah tells Adam that he brought for him a suitable helper. Okay. So if I can find that.
I wonder if Yahuwah realized when he prophesied through all these humans that, the word stick and the word tree were the same word. And when he talked about virtuous and powerful military ally, I mean, I wonder if he had a clue that those would all be strung together like that. Lucky for him that these coincidences exist.
So in Genesis chapter 1, when Yahuwah says that he brought to Adam a suitable helper, that word for helper literally means a military front. Can you believe that? That's literally what it means, a military front. So Yahushua is coming back with his bride, who is his army. Now, some people would argue, and I've heard people say this to me, they say, oh, no, it says in Deuteronomy 24 that when a man takes a wife, that he's not allowed to go out to war for the first year of their marriage. Okay, that's true. But see, what's different about this situation is that Yahushua is not leaving his bride alone. He's not separating himself from her. He is taking her with him. They're going to be battle partners. Okay. It's not the same scenario.
Neither of them are at risk of dying.
Yeah, because we'll be in our new incorruptible bodies. That means we'll be indestructible. So it's not the same thing. But people try to, say there's not going to be a quote unquote rapture, harpazo, catching away of the bride. There is going to be one, but it's at the end of the 3.5 year ministry of the two witnesses. It's not pre-trib, it's post-trib. And it's going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, so I contend that this prophecy in Isaiah 66 is speaking of 1948, when Israel was reborn as a nation in one day. There were no labor pains, because it was not yet time for the one new man or the corporate man-child to be born yet. Now, I know some people say, oh, the modern state of Israel is not the real Israel. They say that, it's a construct of the political Zionists. But you know what? Yahuwah says in his word in Proverbs that he lays up the wealth of the wicked to be used for the just. And if he wants to use the wealth of the wicked to set up the end time scenario so that, the Yahudim, the Jews and the nations could come back to their land and they would all meet with him at the Mount of Olives. It says in Zechariah 12:10, they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. Well, wait a minute. If they're all fake Jews over there, then who's going to be meeting him at the Mount of Olives? I mean, it tells us who they are. I mean, this idea that all the Jews in Israel are all fake Jews, I am so sick and tired of hearing that because it's just simply false. And scripture debunks that notion, tells us right here who they are. I mean, he tells us that in that day, Yahuwah shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as Elohim, and the Malach Yahuwah before them. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And that means you better watch your mouth when you speak against the people that live over there, because he says he will destroy you if you come against them. Because Yahuwah still has a remnant living in the land that do belong to him. And he's already marked them in the foreheads ahead of time so that when that day comes, they will go to the Mount of Olives. They will be looking for him. And it says, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Yerushalayim the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So you better be careful what you say when you say all the Jews in Israel are fake Jews. They're the synagogue of Satan. He says he will destroy you if you come against them. It is not your place to know who is who. It is not your place to know who belongs to who. Yahuwah knows. He will decide that, not you, not anybody. So I don't want to hear this, oh, the fake Jews, the synagogue of Satan. You know who the synagogue of Satan is? Did you know that the Jesuits in Rome take these secret blood oaths, and they literally, in their secret blood oath, they say that they promise to mimic the Jews and to pretend to be Jews so that they can make the real Jews look bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the synagogue of Satan right there.
Yep.
Okay. So be careful what you say. I'm tired of this anti-Jewish rhetoric that I've been hearing. Okay. So Israel's rebirth physically as a nation did not require labor pains. It happened suddenly. It happened in one day in 1948. But in the future, Jerusalem, which is called the mother of us all, Galatians 4:26, will give birth again, but not to a piece of real estate. In Revelation 12, the rebirth is about the one new man, the corporate two witnesses. Now, just as Naomi could not redeem her land without a male heir, the nation of Israel cannot redeem their land of inheritance without their Messiah. See, this is why the born-again believers in Messiah, just like Ruth, will give birth on her behalf. Remember, Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi, and she gave birth to a child, and that child belonged to Naomi. She actually handed over the child to Naomi, and Naomi, even though she was an older woman who was past the menopause age, was still able to nurse that baby. Okay, that's a biological fact few people understand, but the mammary glands can be activated by the child suckling. And you don't even have to be the real mother of that child. You can still nurse that child. Okay, so in the same way that Ruth had a child and handed that child over to Naomi, the one new man, when Jerusalem gives birth to the one new man, she too will be saved. Okay. They will be resurrected after suffering labor pains, after the woman suffers labor pains. Okay. So there's two different rebirths. In 1948, it was the rebirth of the nation of Israel, the kingdom of Judah. Those that were in the nations came back to the land. The physical descendants of Abraham, the sands on the seashore. But now, this time, after the two witnesses are killed, they are resurrected. Now it's going to be the stars of the heavens. They're born again, one new man. They're going to be reborn. Okay? So the Hebrew word for tribulation is sarah, and it means a tight and narrow place. Well, that's a birth canal. A birth canal is a tight and narrow place. What is the tightest and narrowest place you can think of in prophecy? It's a birth canal. It also means sister rivalry. Well, there was rivalry between Rachel and Leah, these two sisters. There was also rivalry between those two harlots that went to King Solomon asking him to settle the dispute. In the same way that Rachel and Leah were two sisters competing for the affections of their husband Jacob, so the two houses of Israel have been fighting for control over their land for 2,000 years. It's just like those two harlots fighting over their baby boy who was their inheritance. They have not yet realized that it is impossible for them to have control over their land until they give birth to the one new man. Thus, Israel cannot be free until she goes through the tribulation of childbirth. So these people in the Christian church would say, oh, we're not going to go through tribulation. Well, then guess what? You're not going to be born from the birth canal then, because there's no C-sections. Okay, there's no C-sections in heaven. If you don't go through the birth canal, you're not going to be reborn into your incorruptible body. So this is what the word tribulation means. It means a tight and narrow place. If you don't go through that birth canal, then guess what? You're not going to get to put on incorruption. So quit saying we're not going to go through tribulation. What do you want to be, stillborn? What do you want to go? You want to come through as a C-section? No, it ain't going to happen that way. We have to go through tribulation. It's a must. There's no way around it. And then you hear Christians say, oh, well, the Bible says we're not appointed to wrath. Well, guess what? Wrath is not the same thing as tribulation. Wrath means punishment.
Yeah, wrath is more akin to destruction. Not that it always means destruction, but often wrath means you're destroyed.
It literally means punishment. But what does tribulation mean? It means persecution. Well, the devil's children aren't going to get persecuted, but the one new man, the two witnesses, they're persecuted.
Would you also agree that when you see persecution in Scripture, it implies unjustly?
Yeah.
Right? So persecution is never used to mean the wicked were punished and they deserved it.
Right.
You don't call a criminal someone who's persecuted because they were put in jail.
Exactly. So the Apostle Shaul Paul prophesied that Eve, though she was deceived by the serpent, would have the opportunity to be redeemed or saved once she gives birth to the seed, which we know is Messiah, and also his offspring, okay, which would be the bride. We are the one new man. We are his offspring. This is why in 1 Timothy 2:15, he says, notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety. Well, that's like a cryptic statement that Paul's making. It seems out of place because, first he talks about the marriage relationship between Adam and Eve, and he says, I do not permit a woman to teach a man. But see, the Greek word there for woman is gune, which means wife. And the Greek word there for man is husband, aner. See, the English translators chose to use woman and man, but that's not the right words. The same words, gune and aner, are used in Ephesians where Paul says, husbands, love your wives. Now, in Ephesians, they used the right English word. They translated, gune as wife, and they translated aner as husband. But for some odd reason, in 1 Timothy, they translate, gune as woman, and they translate, aner as man, giving the impression that Paul was against a woman teaching in the assembly. But Paul was not against women teaching. In fact, he gave certain women permission to teach so long as they are under the authority of their husband. And that's why he said that women may prophesy so long as their head is covered. He's not talking about a veil or a hat. He's talking about authority. That's for another teaching. But he said the woman's hair is her covering. Okay. So the woman's hair is her covering. Now, if you want to wear a head covering, that's fine. I don't have anything against that. But, some people get really legalistic about it and they act like, oh, if you're not wearing a covering, you're sinning. That's for another teaching. But here's the thing. Right after Paul goes into this whole, he's talking to the congregation at Ephesus. And you see, the congregation at Ephesus, they were steeped in this cult of Diana Artemis, where they worshiped Diana and they emasculated men, and they would, make men into eunuchs, and they sacrificed men to Diana. And they were all out of order in that culture. It was a female dominance cult. It was a feminist type of cult. Just like today in American culture, you have feminism is like, really running rampant. So what was Shaul or Paul doing? He was trying to correct the false narrative that these people were under. And he was saying, I do not permit a wife to usurp her husband's authority. That's what he was talking about. He wasn't saying that women aren't allowed to speak in the assembly. He wasn't saying that women aren't allowed to teach. He even said they're allowed to prophesy so long as they're under their husband's authority. Okay. So Paul's trying to bring order back into the marriage relationship. That's the reason he brings up Adam and Eve. But at the end of the verse, he says, it says that Adam was formed first and then Eve. And then he says that Adam was not in the transgression because he wasn't deceived, but Eve was in the transgression because she was deceived. But then he says, but notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety. So this is like obviously talking about the prophecy of the seed of the woman in Genesis, where it says that Eve would give birth to the seed, which is Messiah. Okay. So she is indicative of Jerusalem. Eve is she typifies the whole nation she typifies the kingdom of Judah, the Jerusalem. And when she gives birth to the one new man, she too will be saved. Her kingdom will be restored. Her land will be restored back to her. In Galatians 4, the apostle Shaul, Paul, likened Jerusalem, which is above, in other words, the heavenly Jerusalem, he likens it to Sarah, who's the free woman. Then he likens the earthly Jerusalem, which is still in bondage to her enemies in the nations, to Hagar, the slave woman. Because right now, Jerusalem is still in bondage to her enemies. I mean, they're constantly getting attacked by the Palestinians. And of course, the anti-Messiah, the false Messiah, is going to pretend like he's in favor of them. Trump's been signed, an agreement and with Israel. He made Jerusalem the capital city again, and everybody worships him because of it. And also, he signed a bill that said that Judaism is a nationality. Basically, he signed an agreement that Jews are, a nation of people. And also, he is pro-Jew. I mean, he even converted to Judaism in 2017. I mean, I've got documentation on that. But I believe he's going to turn on them. I don't believe that's going to last. Only when the born-again bride of Messiah, who is given a new name, the heavenly Jerusalem, Revelation 3:12, shall the earthly Jerusalem be made free. And Revelation 12:2, it says, and she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And then in verse 5, it says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. Now, this takes place after the ministry of the two witnesses is finished, okay? The earthly Jerusalem will go through labor pains at last when she gives birth to her spiritual children. It's not the same kind of birth that Israel experienced in 1948 when she gave birth to the piece of real estate. Her birth in 1948 was a birth of a promise given long ago to Abraham, and yet the earthly Jerusalem has only been reborn since 2017 when President Trump decreed she's the capital city of Israel. Now, as we get closer to the second coming of Messiah, the increase in earthquakes has caused the Earth's poles to shift, causing a year to gradually move back towards a 360-day year, as in the days of Noah. Proof of this is in the fact that during the Great Tribulation, the two witnesses will have a ministry that lasts for 1,260 days, which, when divided by 30 days, equals 3.5 years. If a year continued to be 364 days long, which is what the Enoch calendar is, or people call it the Zadok calendar. If the year was 364 days long, once the two witnesses arrived onto the scene, 1,260 days would not equal 42 months or 3.5 years. So we take 42 times 30, that's 1,260 days. We take 1,260 divided by 30, that's 3.5 years. Currently, the lunar cycles alternate with 30 days in one month, and then in the next month, it's 29.5 days in the following month, causing one lunar year to be 357 days. That is 3 days shy of 360 days, which was the length of a year in Noah's day. Okay. However, a solar year is 364 days. The difference between a solar year, 364 days, and a lunar year, 357 days, is 7 days. So there's a discrepancy of 7 days between the solar and the lunar calendar. So if we take the 360 biblical year, if we add 4 days to that, we get 364. But if we subtract 357, the lunar calendar, we end up with 7 days. Now, when those 7 days are divided, it comes out to 3.5 days. This is exactly the length of time when the two witnesses have their dead bodies laying in the streets before they are resurrected. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Yahuwah is trying to show us something very profound here, that the calendar was purposely messed up after the flood in Noah's day. The earth's poles shifted. But as soon as the two witnesses come onto the scene and begin their ministry, I believe there's going to be earthquakes and tsunamis. We're already hearing about the magnetic North Pole is trading places right now with the magnetic South Pole. In Isaiah 24, we are shown that Yahuwah is about to turn the earth upside down. And that's not like literally like he's going to turn the entire earth upside down. It's the magnetic poles are going to be turned upside down. Right here, this is a judgment prophecy on the whole earth. This is happening right now. Behold, Yahuwah makes the earth empty. And if you look up that word for empty, it's bakah, and it means to depopulate. See, he's allowing these global elites to depopulate. Those who are stupid enough to take, I'm sorry if I sound really insensitive in saying that, but those that took the, snake bite, they're dying. And, it says he makes it waste and turns it upside down and scatters abroad the inhabitants thereof. So, forgive me for sounding insensitive. I know that was probably kind of mean to say, stupid enough, but, I'm sorry. We are told to have discernment, and those that study to show themselves approved would know not to allow that kind of thing into their bodies. Okay, our body's a temple for the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, but right now, Yahuwah is turning the magnetic poles upside down, and this means we're going to go back to a 360-day year, just like in the days of Noah. Okay, and so this harpazo is what people call rapture. The word rapture is just the Latin word rapturo, It means the same thing as harpazo in Greek. It means to seize, to snatch, to carry away, to take by force. It means the same thing. So when this harpazo, this post-tribulation rapture of the bride taken up to heaven for a literal 7-day elopement, the resurrection and the ascension of these two witnesses takes place after their 1,260 days of ministry. Their resurrection and ascension to heaven also takes place at the 7th trumpet blast, which is what Paul was talking about here in 1 Corinthians 15:52. He says, at the last trumpet, the last trump. Okay? This is clearly a post-tribulation harpazo. I don't think it's a coincidence that President Trump is the last trump. He's the last, little horn. The word little horn in Daniel's prophecy, the word horn literally means coronet, an instrument, a trumpet. Okay? He's the little trump, the little horn. Okay? Have you noticed that 1 Kings 11:11 and Revelation 11:11 are coincidentally numbered the same way by the English translators, and they both convey the same prophetic picture. In 1 Kings 11:11, it says, wherefore Yahuwah said unto Solomon, for as much as this is done of you, and you have not kept my covenant, my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely rend the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. And then what happens here in Revelation 11:11? And after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them, which saw them. See, King Solomon broke the covenant and divided the house of Israel into two houses. However, the two witnesses are these same redeemed two houses who shall come, they shall come together as one new man, and they will be resurrected as the man-child. See, it is when these two witnesses are resurrected and united as one new man that the curses that have been brought on to the kingdom by King Solomon will be reversed. Okay? That King Solomon is a type and shadow of the false Messiah because he collected 666 talents of gold every year. And he did start out as a wise man. Our Messiah said that King Solomon was one of the wisest men to ever live. But in his latter years, he let these heathen wives turn him away to false gods and idols. So he fell away and he collected 666 talents of gold every year. And so King Solomon caused the kingdom to be divided. And the false Messiah is also now divided the house again between these heathen nations with the Abraham Accords. See, it tells us in Daniel chapter 8, let me show it to you. Daniel chapter 8. Okay. Daniel chapter 8, 23. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to start with verse 23 through 25. Okay. It says, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full king of fierce countenance. When you look up this fierce countenance, it means a rough countenance. That's describing Trump to the T. And it says understanding dark sentences. Well, everyone says he speaks in code. The QAnon people say he speaks in code. And not only that, he's been studying Kabbalah magic since the 1980s. He even admitted it in his book, The Way to the Top. He talks about his Kabbalah teacher, okay? And understanding dark sentences. In other words, he speaks in riddles. Didn't he read that poem about the woman and the snake? And at the time, we all were like, what's that all about? Well, now we know what it's about. The snake bite. And Daniel 8:24, and it says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. It's talking about the people of the land of Israel. And it says, and through his policy, that's the Abraham Accords, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart. And that means he boasts about himself. He calls himself the king of Israel. He calls himself the father of the snake bites. He calls himself the king of Israel. He says, the people in Israel love me like I'm the second coming of God. He tweeted this on Twitter in 2019. He brags all the time. He says, nobody knows the Bible better than me. Nobody loves the Jewish people more than me. Nobody that does this better than me. I mean, he's always making these really outlandish, braggadocious statements about himself. And it says, and by peace shall destroy many. And he shall also stand up against the Prince of Princes. That's Messiah. But it says he shall be broken without hand. Well, here's the thing. The peace agreement, the Abraham Accords, there's a clause in there that said the people of these nations, Bahrain, Israel, and United Arab Emirates, that they were required to cooperate with these snake bites. Okay? So he is destroying many with a peace agreement. Okay? That is the fulfillment of the little horn. Okay? So what else is significant about the number 11? Do you remember Joseph in Egypt? His 11 brothers came to Egypt to buy grain, and they ultimately were restored back to him, and thus his prophetic dream came to pass. His 11 brothers bowed down to him in the same way that the 11 tribes will bow down to their Messiah from the tribe of Judah. See, 11 equals 22. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and there's 22 strands in the human DNA. See, the number 11 prophetically represents destruction for the 11 brothers of Joseph who sought to destroy him. They did not realize that in doing so, they were destroying their entire family. This is why our Messiah said, house divided is brought to desolation. Matthew 12:25 and Mark 3:25. Okay, when the two halves of this divided house are restored, the human genome created in the image of Elohim will also be restored. The 11th son of Jacob, okay, that would be Joseph. He's a prophetic picture of our Messiah. And without him in the house, there is no salvation. There is no restoration. But you see, it was the 12th son, Benjamin, who was instrumental in uniting the entire family back together again. It was when the brother Benjamin was brought to Egypt that Joseph finally revealed his true identity to his brothers, and there was finally weeping and repentance and restoration to the house. See, similarly, this is the reason why I believe Yahushua chose the apostle Shaul, Paul, who was also from the tribe of Benjamin. He wrote 13 letters for the 13th tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim was the 13th tribe. Okay? In other words, the 10 northern tribes of Israel. You see, I've got this blog called The 13th Apostle Sent to the 13th Tribe. Now, some people say that Paul was not a legitimate apostle. That's a lie. Apostle Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin. I believe that Yahuwah used him to bring all the tribes back to their Messiah. Okay, just like Benjamin in the story of Joseph, he's the 13th or he's the 12th brother, okay, but he was used to bring all the tribes back to Joseph, or all the brothers back to Joseph, just like Paul's epistles are used to bring all the tribes back to their Messiah. See, thus the restoration of the two houses of Israel is connected prophetically to the 12-month lunar and solar cycles. See, Joseph was given a dream wherein the sun, the moon, and the stars bowed to him. Okay, in Bereshit, Genesis 37:9, it says, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. See, Joseph is a prophetic picture of our Messiah, and whose 10 brothers will be united to him in the last days. The 11th star symbolizes Jacob, his father. Therefore, the witness of the sun, the moon, and the stars will be used to bring about the restoration. See, in Genesis 1:14-16, it says, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, that's the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, that's the moon. And it says he made the stars also. See, as we get closer to the second coming of Messiah, The increase in earthquakes and tsunamis will cause the Earth's poles to shift, thus causing a year to gradually move back to a 360-day year, just like in the days of Noah. So, during the Great Tribulation of 1,260 days, the length of a biblical year will revert back to 360 days. See, the solar cycle of 364 days, which so many people are trying to, put a square peg into a round hole, or vice versa, put a round peg into a square hole. Either way, trying to fix the calendar is an exercise in futility, because Yahuwah is about to change the year back to a 360-day year. But all these people are getting on the bandwagon with the Enoch calendar, trying to, make the 364-day work, but they have to eliminate the moon. They say the moon does not have to come into the equation. That's false, because I just got done showing you Joseph, who's a prophetic type and shadow of Messiah. He had a dream that the sun, the moon, and the stars all bowed down to him. In other words, Yahushua, who is himself time. He says, I am the first and the last. I am the beginning and the ending, right? He himself is time. If the sun, the moon, and the stars bow down to him, okay, that means that all time itself has to be determined by these three luminaries, the sun, the moon, and the stars. We can't eliminate any of these three witnesses. All three witnesses were involved the night he was born, when the constellation of the Virgin giving birth to the Messiah, the man-child, the one new man, she was giving birth to the lion with Venus and Jupiter in conjunction, Melchizedek. And the sliver of the moon was underneath her feet. She was clothed with the sun, and she had a crown of 12 stars. You see, all three witnesses testified the night our Messiah was born on the Feast of Trumpets. And the same thing's going to happen again in the future. His bride will also be reborn into incorruption on the Feast of Trumpets. Okay? And so, this discrepancy between the solar calendar of 364 days and the lunar calendar of 357 days means that there's a 7-day discrepancy. But if we divide that in half, it's 3.5 days. This is how long the two witnesses are dead before they are raised up. 3.5 days. Currently, it takes 365.25 days for the earth to make a full revolution around the sun. In Hebrew, this is called a tekufa. Okay? It means, an equinox or a full revolution. This means that a sabbatical year, in other words, a shemitah, every 7 years is called a shemitah in Hebrew. It currently lasts for these amount of days. 7 times 365.25 equals 2556.75 days. However, when a solar year is shortened during the ministry of the two witnesses, a shemitah, a 7-year period, will only last for 2,520 days. 7 times 360 is 2,520 days. That's a total of 36.7 days removed from every 7 years. So the days will be shortened, just like our Messiah said. Every 7 years will be 36.75 days shorter. Okay? Dividing 2,520 days in half is exactly 1,260 days. So you see, the days being shortened has more than one application here. The solar calendar is followed by the Gentiles who've adopted pagan holidays that are patterned after sun god worship. Therefore, the Gentiles must remove or subtract 4 days from their solar calendar to make things right. This means they must repent for worshiping the sun, which was created on the 4th day. Genesis 1:14 through 16, and also Ezekiel 8:16. Our Messiah died on the 4th day of the week, what we would today call Wednesday. In other words, to pay for the sin of sun god worship. That's why he died on the 4th day of the week, because the sun was created on the 4th day of creation. and the heathens worship the sun. So he died on a Wednesday, on the fourth day of the week, to pay for the sin of sun god worship. Alternatively, Judaism follows a lunar calendar. Therefore, they must add to their calendar 3 days to make things right. You see, they must accept the one who is called the Son of Righteousness in Malachi 4:2. They've rejected the Messiah. They don't recognize him as the Son of Righteousness who shall arise with healing in his wings. And guess what? He resurrected on the third day. Okay? They must accept the one who resurrected on the third day. So it is the restoration of a 360-day year that causes the days of the year to be shortened, and thus the restoration of the two houses of Israel. Interestingly, our Messiah fulfilled the pattern of the 3.5-year-old red heifer from Numbers 19. And in doing so, he sanctified the defiled altar in the temple, causing the Passover lamb to be accepted that year. Okay, Numbers 19:12 tells us, he shall purify himself with it on the third day, and on the seventh day he shall be clean. But if he purify not himself the third day, then the seventh day he shall not be clean. You see, the third day is significant in sanctifying the seventh day Sabbath. Without our Messiah as the red heifer who sanctifies the altar, even our Shabbat is unclean. For he alone is the master of the Sabbath, for he resurrected on the seventh day after being buried for 3 days and 3 nights. And on the third day from his sacrifice is when he arose from the dead, conquering everything that is unclean. So you see, since our Messiah is called the Son of Righteousness, this is a hint because the sun was made on the fourth day of creation. This also explains why our Messiah began his ministry in the year 4000. You know, when he emerged out of that 40-day fast and went into the synagogue and he read the Isaiah 61 scroll, I was able to calculate all the jubilees from the time that Josephus, the Jewish historian, told us that 23 BC was the 79th Jubilee. And I was able to come to the conclusion that the year he began his ministry was 27 AD, and it was the year 4000 from creation. So he begins his ministry in the year 4000, the fourth millennium. He died on the fourth day of the week. This is why he's called the Son of Righteousness, because Yahuwah created the sun on the fourth day of the week. And see, the sun is a picture of our Messiah. He's the true light of the world. But the devil wants us to believe he's the sun. That's why he tricks people into worshiping the sun instead of the person who created the sun. See, we are told that with Yahuwah, 1,000 days is like 1,000 years is like one day. Okay, 2 Peter 3:8. 1 day is like 1,000 years. In keeping with this pattern, he died on the fourth day of the week, what we would call Wednesday, and that represents the fourth millennium when he came. When 4 solar days are subtracted from the calendar and 3 lunar days are added, the discrepancy between the lunar and solar calendar amounts to 3 days. Therefore, it was necessary for our Messiah to die on the fourth day of the week, the same day when the sun was created. And it is because of the idolatry of backsliding Israel and their worshiping of the sun. Ezekiel 8:16 says they worship the sun. He literally crucified the sin of sun god worship during his ministry of 3.5 years. See, the nation, the kingdom of Judah must accept the sacrifice of their Messiah and his resurrection on the third day. For them, he literally crucified their sin of rejecting his atonement. This is why the 2 witnesses must be killed. And after their ministry of 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years, followed by their resurrection of 3.5 days. See, both houses, Jews and Gentiles, correct their ways, including Yahuwah's divine calendar. The resurrection of the 2 witnesses will bring about balance and restoration to the whole house. As I already illustrated, the number 7 in the Hebrew is the Hebrew word sheba, which means to take an oath, to swear. Our Messiah, who is Melchizedek, he's the one who's been sworn. He's been sworn into his office as an eternal high priest. He's the only one who's able to restore and to save Israel. The rest of the Gentile world will be blessed once Israel's restoration has been completed. Romans 11:11 through 12. It is the restoration of the 360-day year that causes the days to be shortened, and thus the restoration of the two houses of Israel. See, this is why our Messiah said, unless those days should be shortened, no flesh would be saved. The reason he shortens the days, the reason why he cut the last 7 years of Daniel's 70th week in half, he fulfilled 3.5 years, and then the two witnesses finish out the 3 years. The reason he did that, and the reason he shortens the days and restores us back to a 360-day year, is so that Israel would be saved. See, the spring equinox, which marks the beginning of a new solar year, used to fall on March 25th, which was the pagan Easter Sunday. 9 months later, on December 25th, her pagan sun gods are supposedly reincarnated. This is from ancient Mystery Babylon religion. The removal of those 4 extra days in a solar cycle, which is why our Messiah died on the 4th day of the week, will cause everything else in the cosmos to be equalized, thus shortened back to the original calendar from the creation. In recent years, the spring equinox has been falling on March 19th or the 20th, causing the days of the year to be fewer and thus shortened. The days are actually becoming shorter. Okay? This means we are getting closer to the ministry of the two witnesses, which will commence once we see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. Matthew 24:15 through 21. And once we see this image that is made, that is erected to the beast in Revelation 13:14 through 15, it says that they will make an image to the beast. Once we see that in the temple, we can begin counting 1,260 days, or 3.5 years for the ministry of the two witnesses. Now, concurrently, the beast is going to be speaking blasphemies, great things and blasphemies, for 42 months during these same 3.5 years. After their ministry of 1,260 days, the beast shall kill these two witnesses, but they will be resurrected after 3.5 days, and this will be the catalyst that brings about what is called the 10 days of awe. You see, there's 10 days from the Feast of Trumpets leading up to the second coming of Messiah on Yom Kippur. The Feast of Trumpets is when the two witnesses are taken up to heaven, but then 10 days later, they come back with him on white horses, and that's when he's going to meet all those from the kingdom of Judah who maybe didn't accept him right away, but during those 10 days of awe, they're going to do what? They're going to go and buy the oil, just like the wise virgins told the foolish virgins to go buy the oil. Okay? During those 10 days, they're going to go buy the oil. The foolish virgins that were left out of the wedding, they are going to go buy the oil during those 10 days of awe. And what is the oil? We are told in Song of Solomon 1:3, it says, your name is like oil poured forth. Therefore, do the virgins love you? See, it will be those last 10 days of tribulation. Revelation 2:10 says that Smyrna must suffer tribulation for 10 days. That's the 10 days of awe. And I even looked up the word for awe in Hebrew, and it means tribulation. Okay? The 10 days of tribulation for Smyrna is when the foolish virgins were going to go buy that oil, and they're going to go and recognize Yahushua as their Messiah, because see, they don't know his name, but Philadelphia has not denied my name, is what he said to them. So Smyrna has to suffer tribulation for an extra 10 days because they don't have the oil of his name. And this is why Philadelphia has an open door that no man can shut, for they have not denied his name. Revelation 3:8 through 12. During these last 10 days of tribulation, only those foolish virgins from Smyrna that overcome In other words, they go by the oil. They will not have their names blotted out of the book of life. Revelation 3:5 says only those who overcome will not have their names blotted out. However, if they remain faithful unto death, they shall receive a crown of life. Revelation 2:10. See, did you know that the human genome, the human DNA, is literally called the book of life? That the scientists actually call the human DNA the book of life? And encoded into the DNA of a human being is the 4 letters to our Father's name, Yod He Wah He. We'll see the beast wants to remove those 4 letters of his name from the genome. And so those who overcome the beast by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony will not have their names blotted out of the book of life. And how do we overcome? We don't give in to his what he wants us to do. We don't take his mark. We don't give in. That's how we overcome. We overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And as long as Smyrna overcomes, they will not have their name blotted out of the book of life. In other words, their DNA, their human genome will be intact. Okay? So this is what is meant by except those days should be shortened. And people need to understand that this is happening even right now as we speak. And I'm going to go to my Facebook page because I want to show you something really fascinating that's going on right now as we speak. And just bear with me a moment. I'm trying to scroll down to this article that I posted last week that has to do with the earth speeding up. I know some people that are flat earthers don't believe that the earth spins or that it moves, but of course, we know differently. Okay. It says here in this article, and this is from August 1st, it says Earth completes rotation in less than 24 hours, smashes record again for shortest day. It says if the Earth continues to spin at an increasing rate, it could lead to the introduction of the negative leap seconds. It says on July 29th, the Earth broke its record for the shortest day as it completed a full spin in 1.59 milliseconds, less than its standard 24-hour rotation. According to The Independent, the planet recently has been increasing in its speed. Back in 2020, the Earth saw its shortest month that has ever been recorded since the 1960s. On July 19th of that year, the shortest of all time was measured. It was 1.47 milliseconds shorter than the typical 24-hour day. The next year, the planet continued to spin at a generally increased rate, but it did not break any records. However, according to Interesting Engineering, a 50-year phase of shorter days may be starting right now. Wow. You see that? The days are being shortened. The days are literally being shortened. Now, we've got a little bit more time before I start going to Q&A. But I wanted to talk about, the raid. I'm not going to say the whole word because, I got to be careful that I'm not flagged. But everybody knows about the raid, okay? I truly believe that this is all by design to make Trump look like a messiah figure, a poor persecuted martyr. See, I just listened to a YouTube video in the last couple of days that this raid actually bolstered his ratings and his numbers, and more people are behind him than ever. This is all by design. On January 6th, 2021, under the Capitol Dome, which, in Freemasonry, they call that the womb of Isis, okay? The Insurrection Act was enacted in plain sight. See, January 6th in the Roman Catholic religion is called the Feast of the Epiphany, where it is believed that the Christ was manifested to the wise men. The word epiphania in Greek means God manifest, as it was also a title given to the Greek Syrian dictator Antiochus in 167 BC when he erected an image to the beast, which was a statue of Zeus, on December 25th in the Second Temple. In Greek gematria, the word epiphania also has a numeric value of 666. Now, you see, this is a meme I made. It says a false messiah wants you to think he's being persecuted. just like the real Messiah was persecuted. The real Messiah was falsely accused of what? Insurrection. Luke 23:18-25. On January 6, 2021, a certain political leader was accused of what? Insurrection. You see, these events are being staged to make this person look like the real Messiah. Then everyone wants to rally for the underdog. These people understand psychology. They know how to manipulate people into doing what they want. Okay? So don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Okay? Now, I want to read this little, this is another thing that I made called America is not Mystery Babylon. Everybody thinks America is Mystery Babylon. Let me explain to you why. America is the beast, the eighth king of Revelation 17:10, whose kingdom will unite the kingdoms of the earth. In other words, the 10 horns on the beast. You see, I believe America will soon become a revived Roman Empire, the fourth kingdom on earth. It says in Daniel 7:24-25. America is the new Rome. See, in 1871, America became owned by the Vatican City Bank. And so, prior to 1871, America was a sovereign nation. But after 1871, we got sold to the Vatican. And now, ever since 1871, America, belong to the Vatican City Bank and the Bank of London. So I believe America is going to become the Fourth Reich of Nazi Germany. Mystery Babylon is called a great city, not a great nation. Okay. Jerusalem is that great city. The Greek word for great city is megaspolis. See if I can make this bigger. Okay. Megaspolis. Okay. The Greek word for great nation is megas ethnos. See, if this was talking about a great nation in the book of Revelation, it would use the term megas ethnos. It doesn't use that. It says megaspolis, that great city. America's not a city. America is a nation. See, the Greek word for great nation, or the term that great city is used 11 times in the book of Revelation. And it is identified as where our master was crucified. In Revelation 11:8, it tells us that the two witnesses will be speaking out against the false Messiah where our Lord was crucified. That's the great city. Okay. In Revelation 16:11, we are shown a prophecy that has already come to pass in 1993 when Jerusalem was handed over to Pope John Paul II by the Prime Minister Shimon Peres under the Oslo Accords. You see, at that time, Pope John Paul II divided up the city into 3 parts. The Muslim section, the Jewish section, and the Christian section. And what does it say in Revelation 16:11? It says, and that great city was divided into 3 parts. And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before Elohim to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Now, why is Jerusalem called Great Babylon? Because the Vatican is going to set up their headquarters there. The false Messiah is going to set up the one world religion there. Okay. See, the ancient religion of Babylon will be revived in Jerusalem, where the false Messiah will build the third temple, and it says he will take away the daily sacrifices. The daily sacrifices that are offered up in worship to Yahuwah, he will take those away, and he will do what? He will set up an image to the beast. And like I said, I believe this will be a cloned image of Jesus, supposedly from the Shroud of Turin. They've been talking about this for the last 20 years on the internet, that there will be, I believe there's going to be a hybrid human Nephilim artificial intelligence creature that will be the image to the beast. Revelation 18:24 says that identifies that great city by using the same words that our Messiah did when he decreed desolation over Jerusalem. Listen what it says in Revelation 8:24. It says, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the Kadoshim, the saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth. Okay, this is referring to Babylon, great Babylon, mystery Babylon, that in her was found the blood of the prophets. And what does Messiah tell us in Matthew 23:37? O Jerusalem, you that kill the prophets and stone them that are sent unto you. How often would I have gathered your children together, even as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, and you would not. See, everyone's acting like it's Obama that's going to build the temple, but Trump is going to do it, not Obama. The Zionists have asked Trump to do it. I believe he is the one that's going to do it. Once Trump builds the temple, it says they will make an image to the beast, which I believe will be a giant image of a clone of Jesus, which has artificial intelligence. And all those who've been given the snake bite with the DNA alteration will be, connected to this abominable image. They will be connected to this artificial intelligent being. Okay, I believe that Obama could come back in some form, but not as the man of sin, not as the one who's going to build the temple. He'll probably be one of the 10 horns who rules for 1 hour with the beast. He may come back in some form, but not as the man of sin who builds the temple. Now, knowing that President Roosevelt once said that everything that is done in politics is planned, that nothing is done by accident, it would seem that Trump's words about becoming the prime minister of Israel was a clue. These things that he says, it says he speaks in dark sentences, right? People think he's just joking. But like Roosevelt said, nothing's by accident. Everything he says is planned, and it's by design to give people a hint. When he said he'd become the prime minister of Israel, it's not an accident. He intends to become the king of Israel. See, will America be destroyed? I have no doubt that the political structure of the nation will be destroyed before our Messiah returns. But that's going to happen to all the nations of the earth, according to Daniel 2:44 through 45. Also, Revelation 11:15 tells us the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Messiah. Okay, so, and then, of course, I already showed you guys the newspaper or the, article from Jerusalem Post, the King Messiah Trump from August 29th, 2019. They call him the king. They call him the Messiah over there. It's crazy because he made Jerusalem the capital city again. Now, I wanted to share with us one more thing. We got 14 more minutes. It says, our Messiah taught that there would be many false messiahs and false prophets. Matthew 24:5 through 11. And people always say, oh, are you telling me that Trump's the Antichrist? Listen, there's no such thing as the in front of the word Antichrist. There is no the in front of Antichrist. There's many Antichrists. There's the spirit of Antichrist. There, the Bible says that Antichrist shall come, but there's no word the in front of it because our Messiah said there'd be many of them, right? Which is why there are many names and terms that come out to this number in these last days. And they all are related to the beast. Now, if you go to this website, it's called antichristcalculator.com. And I use that website because they have 10 different methods of gematria. They have the most, exhaustive, they even have computer ASCII code, right? So President Donald Trump adds up to 666 in Roman numerals. I believe he's working for the Roman papacy. William Henry Gates, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Elon Reeve Musk. The word that I don't want to say, the V word, okay? Hydroxychloroquine also adds up to it. People go, what? Why does that? Because it's a pharmaceutical drug. And we're told that pharmakia is sorcery. It's witchcraft. Now, you can make your own quinine using citrus peels, grapefruit, lemons, limes, oranges. We don't need to go using the, pharmakia version of that, right? I guess I had Elon Reeve Musk twice. Okay. Prince of Tyre, that's in Ezekiel 28. The Prince of Tyre, that adds up to 666. Alexander the Great, he was a military genius. John Paul II, his name in Latin, Jonas Paulus Secundo, 666. And, I don't want to say this name out loud. I'm just going to show it to you, okay? Kissinger, 666. Summus Pontifex Maximus. That's another official title of a pope. It means the supreme and ultimate bridge. Every pope claims they are the bridge between Elohim and humanity. So Constantine the third in the 4th century gave himself this title, Summus Pontifex Maximus. In other words, the supreme and ultimate bridge. They are so arrogant that they think that they can be the bridge between humanity and Elohim. That title adds up to 666. Another title, official title of Pope, Vicarius Filii Dei. Okay, that adds up to 666. It means substitute for the Son of God. Every pope, when he is coronated, when he's sworn into his office, he's given a crown, and on the crown, it has that title, Vicarius Filii Dei, 666. Gesara, that has to do with the global reset. That's 666. Noahide laws, 666. Now, this guy named Harvey Francis Bernard, he wrote the book, Draining the Swamp. And Trump is following that book to the T. His name adds up to 666. Pizzagate, Antifa, Hillary Diane Clinton, Monsanto, George Mario, that's the first and middle name of Pope Francis, 666. Bergoglio, that's the last name of Pope Francis, 666. Walter Elias Disney, 666. Even C.S. Lewis. Now, some people are shocked when I show them that. Well, C.S. Lewis is not who you think he was. He was, I believe, a secret spy working for Rome. He actually, before he died, he converted to Taoism. Taoism is a form of Hinduism or Buddhism. There's a lot of shocking things about C.S. Lewis that people don't know. But C.S. Lewis actually wrote in many of his books that he believed in purgatory. He believed in the Roman Catholic Mass. He had a lot of strange beliefs. He believed that Christianity stemmed out of paganism. And that's why, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he wrote all of these stories that had like really, occult overtones, sun god worship, things like that. In fact, he even wrote in one of his books, I think it was Mere Christianity, because I did a lot of research about him. He and his wife went to Greece one time, and he said he saw a statue of Apollo, and he said he was tempted to bow down and pray to the statue of Apollo because he believed the statue of Apollo was a lesser form of Christ. This guy was not a true believer.
I would never, ever say or think that. Never.
Yep. In fact, let me show you a website. It's called Jesus is Savior. And this website exposes C.S. Lewis. I mean, it goes into so much detail. It quotes all his crazy things that he says in his books. He became a Catholic before his death. It says Lewis indicates that shortly before his death, he was turning towards the Catholic Church. Lewis termed himself very Catholic. His prayers for the dead, belief in purgatory, and rejection of the literal resurrection of the body are serious deviations from biblical Christianity, according to the author of this is Dr. David Stewart. And I actually read his book about healing oils of the Bible. This guy wrote the book about essential oils, and I have his book on that. But he's the one that is exposing C.S. Lewis here.
Now the essential oils people, which we are essential oils people too.
Yeah.
But now the essential oil people are going to start having to wrestle with, I love C.S. Lewis, but now you've got the guy who's teaching me about essential oils speaking against him, and they're going to be like this, cognitive dissonance,
And he says, this is on C.S. Lewis's biography on page 234 is where he talks about his belief in purgatory and Catholic heresies. Lewis even went to a priest for regular confession, page 198, received the sacrament of the extreme unction. On July 16th, 1963, that's on page 301, his contention that some pagans may belong to Christ without knowing it is a destructive heresy, Mere Christianity, page 1676 through 177. That was his statement that Christ fulfilled paganism and Judaism. That's in his book, Reflections on the Psalms, page 129.
Look further. He denies a literal heaven. He denies a literal hell.
Yep. He claimed the Bible contains myths. I mean, this is just crazy. When you go through this, you're going to be like, what? Because, see, so many Christian ministers tout this guy as just such a great author and orator of Christianity and this and that. So people just accept it without really digging into what he actually wrote in his books. It just becomes like this well-known fact because all these Christian leaders tout C.S. Lewis as some great orator of, the Christian faith, and everybody just accepts it. They just swallow it. They don't even question it. I highly recommend you go to this and you thoroughly examine it. I mean, they go into a lot of detail about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia. If you click on the link to the Chronicles of Narnia, it shows, Tumnus is actually Pan. Pan is like Baphomet. He's a half goat and he's a half man. And there's a scene in the movie where he tells Lucy that he did a very bad thing. And it says right here, Lucy Pavensi's character and Mr. Tumnus's character, played by James McAvoy, and their subtle interactions give the impression of a pedophile trying to lure a little girl into his house. The whole scene is creepy, and the spirit of pedophilia is definitely at work in this movie. Tumnus, Pan, a faun, represents the devil, trying to seduce a young girl. The fact that Tumnus is modeled after Pan, one of the most sexually perverted gods in witchcraft, doesn't bode well for Walt Disney's intentions. If you doubt what I'm saying, you won't by the end of this article. In fact, you're going to be sickened. Furthermore, Tumnus and his flute have magical powers, just like the devil. Tumnus puts the little girl to sleep with his music. The next scene shows the little girl waking up and Tumnus crying, claiming he had done something very bad. The subtle implication is that he sexually molested her. Remember, folks, Pan is the demonic pagan god of sexual perversion and rape. In fact, most images of Pan show him with an erection. So, yeah, this is really bad stuff. I mean, people don't even understand who C.S. Lewis was. They just get told by their pastor that, oh, he was a great Christian writer, blah, blah, blah. No, this whole website exposes everything there is to know about C.S. Lewis. He was great friends with Walt Disney. He was really good friends with the guy that wrote The Lord of the Rings. They were all just steeped in witchcraft, all of them, You really could go through all of this further into the depths of Satan with Narnia. It goes into so much detail about how wicked the Narnia thing is. I just really recommend Jesus-is-savior.com. JesusIsSavior.com. I just Googled Jesus is Savior, C.S. Lewis, and you'll find it. Anyway, I know I just kind of covered a few different things here, but I wanted to share that with you because we are in the last days and there is so much deception and so many people are falling away from the truth. But like our Messiah said, except those days should be shortened, no flesh would be saved. And so the days are being shortened right now, even as we speak. That concludes our study today.
Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. We hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast and that you are encouraged in your walk with Messiah. For more teachings, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified of our latest content. Visit Maria's many blogs at doubleportioninheritance.com. That's doubleportioninheritance.com. This ministry is made possible by the prayers and support of listeners like you. To make a donation by PayPal or Venmo.com, use the email address doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. That's doubleportioninheritance@gmail.com. On behalf of Maria and Gary at Double Portion Inheritance Ministries, may Yahuwah bless you.